In the silent countryside where night envelops the world with its eerie calm, there exists a house that stands like a silent king witness to the echoes of old betrayals. Grace, a woman shaped by life's harsh strokes, returns home expecting warmth and familiarity. Yet the essence of her sanctuary has shifted. A shadow had spread its cold fingers through the corridors she once knew so well. Who, one might wonder, becomes the keeper of shadows in a home that should be filled with light? It is a question that haunts not only the heart but the psyche. In this twilight of echoes past, Grace embodies a spirit that does not shatter easily. She moves with a deliberation born of conflict, of knowing the deceit that can lie in wait under loved ones' smiles like the sharp edge of a blade in velvet. Some betrayals echo louder in silence than in screams, the wise ones say, and Grace was one of the wise. Her soul had sung the mournful ballads of trust, abused and promises discarded. As she steps forward, expecting to be enveloped by the warm embrace of family, she instead discovers the frigid air of hostility cloaked as hospitality. The manipulative feminine, smiling with poisoned courtesy, resembles the embodiment of the cold wind. Jessica, her daughter-in-law, with a charm that cloaks her intentions in sweetened words, has overtaken the space Grace called her own. Alongside her, Matthew, the once beloved son, dances a puppet's dance, each movement a heartbreaking acquiescence to the hidden hand of power. You ask yourself, why does he not rebel? Why does he not cast away those strings? And therein lies the paradox of silence mistaken for impotence. The house, once echoing with familial love, now shifts under the weight of the unforeseen. Grace, in silence, sees with clarity the seeds of usurpation. Your heart might race, imagining the cold logic in her mind, analyzing, strategizing. What you take as a surrender is the beginning of a plan unfurling. She thought his silence meant surrender. It was strategy. You see now the archetype of the betrayed, masking their anguish under a calm veneer, quietly biding their time. As she stands at the threshold of her own home and stares into the eyes of those she thought she knew, it is not weakness you see, but the whetstone of resolve gaining sharpness. In the quiet pluck of a heartstring lies her power, her resolve, gathering in the shadows, waiting for the signal to strike back against the darkness that came to claim her space. There are women who are broken, and there are women who become diamonds forged from the pressure of betrayal. Grace stands among the latter, transforming silence into a strategic weapon, her plans a slow-burning flame under the darkness of night's toll. You suspected betrayal thrived here, yet in this echoing silence you recognize the meticulous precision of a woman preparing to regain what was deceptively taken. She becomes an architect, not merely of her destiny, but of a reckoning that would throw open the doors and illuminate the darkest corners of manipulation's reign. You confront the fateful duality, a dance of light and shadow played upon the halls of a house that was merely a stage for deeper designs. The silent queen does not retreat. She conspires, in her quietude eyes afire with the determination to reclaim the throne from shadowed usurpers. The stage is set, and the players remain unaware that the tapestry of comfort they weave around themselves is but a gaudy shroud soon to be rent by truth's steely edge. They who grow content in their perceived victory do not hear the whisper of the approaching tempest born from a silent woman's heart and mind. Resist the temptation to misjudge the silent. It is within the void of words that the loudest intentions gather strength to thrust forth unyielding. The night's secrets whisper of a plan of a game played not with anger but with calm precision. Grace is not merely enduring. She is calculating, reflecting, donning the cold light of her resolve each morning as she plans her retort. For true justice, silent or spoken, is a balancing act, each weight carefully considered until the moment of revelation brings with it the inevitable realignment, scattering the darkness that dared encroach. Watch as she prepares to cast off the shackles of deceit, proving that true power resides in patience and calculated silence is its sharpest sword. Grace's heart sinks as she surveys the motel room, a temporary refuge that is both unfamiliar and unwelcoming. It is a stark contrast to the warmth she expected to find upon her return home, only to be met with betrayal. Her mind races back to the moment she realized her world was not just turned upside down, but shattered like a fragile glass ornament, crushed beneath a carelessly heavy step. As she paces the small space, each step echoes with the unfairness of it all. Her son Matthew and his wife Jessica, who had promised to care for her in her time of need, have manipulated her in the most profound way. The memory of her belongings strewn callously on the driveway flashes before her eyes. How could those she trusted most be the architects of this cruel betrayal? The fog of hurt is quickly pierced by the laser focus of a determined mind. Grace is not one to wallow endlessly in despair. She is hurt, and undeniably so, but it is the fire lit by betrayal that now fuels her resolve. Betrayed by blood, she turns to the family of her choosing, picking up the phone to call Teresa, a friend and ally whose loyalty had never wavered. Teresa's voice on the other end of the line is a balm to Grace's battered spirit. As the two women speak, the gravity of the situation becomes impossible to ignore. Power of attorney relinquished under duress, the piece of paper that was supposed to safeguard her welfare has become the key to her undoing. They marvel at the audacity of Matthew's betrayal, finding solace in each other's understanding of how deeply such wounds can cut. Together they begin to weave a plan delicate in its intricacy, yet formidable in purpose. Teresa, ever the strategist, suggests a thorough investigation, shining a light into the shadows where betrayal hides. They discuss the need to build a case to transform Grace's personal nightmare into a fight for justice. The thought of exposing the treachery with clarity and precision becomes more than just a distant hope. It is an inevitable journey toward reclaiming her life. The path before her is fraught with challenges and complexities, yet with each obstacle their shared resolve only solidifies. Grace learns from Teresa that knowledge is power, and she resolves to arm herself with both. They begin with the legal documents, combing through them with meticulous care. Hidden among the legal jargon lies a plot thicker than anything Grace could have imagined: financial fraud and deceitful property arrangements, shrouded in complex legal maneuvers that hint at a far-reaching conspiracy. As the layers of deceit peel back, what is revealed is a web spun with greed and manipulation. The Davis family, with their cold ambition, have plotted not just the theft of Grace's home but the acquisition of her entire neighborhood. It is a realization that grips Grace with a chilling anger. Innocent people, families with dreams threaded through the foundations of Magnolia Street, all caught in the crosshairs of a merciless scheme. Grace's fear transforms slowly into a resolute bravery. She is not just fighting for herself now, her battle has grown to encompass the unsuspecting community around her. With the weight of this greater responsibility upon her shoulders, she steps into her role not as a victim but as a crusader of justice. For far too long, she reflects, her silent endurance had been mistaken for weakness. It is time for her voice, not their whispers, to command the narrative. The weekend merges into weekdays, the motel room becoming more a base of operations than a temporary shelter. Through phone calls and sleepless nights huddled over Teresa's kitchen table, the plan solidifies its tendrils, reaching toward every aspect of the conspiracy. In these moments, the specter of betrayal fades, replaced by a sense of purpose, of reclaiming her power and weaving justice from the threads of deceit. As Grace and Teresa press on, they connect with an individual they had once watched only through television dramas, an FBI agent, a beacon of support in a shadowy world. As their dialogue unfolds, the plot against Grace seems to unravel thread by thread until it resembles not a tapestry but a brittle mass ready to collapse under the weight of truth. Though exhaustion tempers their progress, every new day blooms with the promise of redemption. The strategy is clear: arm themselves with irrefutable evidence, hold the architects of this monstrous betrayal accountable, and reclaim not just a home but the very sanctity they dared to violate. In the quiet spaces between plans, Grace feels a spark of hope, a vision of herself as more than a player in another's game, but as the author of her own fate. In the unfolding narrative, Grace's ceaseless quest to dismantle the illusions spun around her life reveals a web of deceit driven by avarice and manipulation. The lines between familial love and betrayal blur as financial ambition overpowers moral conscience. Grace and Teresa step into the role of detectives, peeling back layers of treachery that had insidiously coiled around Magnolia Street. Their investigation, driven by the rhythmic dance of their resolve, uncovers the Davis family's unscrupulous ambition to accumulate properties, capitalizing on Grace's unsuspecting vulnerability. To anyone who dares to silence truth for the sake of convenience, consider this: silence is a breeding ground for injustice. Here lies a tale where betrayal wasn't met with forgiveness alone, but swift, calculated action. In every corner of Magnolia Street, whispers once sweetened with nostalgia turned into tales of deceit as Grace and Teresa pieced together evidence of the meticulously orchestrated fraud. It was a bitter revelation, a family legacy twisted into instruments of deceit, using forged signatures and vacated trust, all meant to drain not just monetary assets, but the spirit itself. Their discovery that the family had manipulated real estate transactions to transform Grace's home into a mere pawn in a larger scheme fueled an intensity within her, previously clouded by the pain of personal loss. The vision of her home entangled in a tapestry of fraudulent deeds was as galling as it was motivating, sparking an irresistible drive to set things right. By inviting the neutral gaze of an FBI agent, a figure epitomizing truth amidst murkiness, they lured the plots from shadow to light. The justice system, an often skeptical battleground of truth and perception, became a silent ally in their fight against the parasitic tendrils of greed. Picture this: an elder who once quietly knitted coziness into each room of her home, now standing resilient, equipped with clandestine technology, stepping foot into the very theater of manipulation staged by her own kin. The hidden microphone was a witness impartial, etching every conspiratorial whisper into auditory permanence. These conversations were insidiously banal, illustrating the embedding of corruption within daily life. Each captured word built an unassailable fortress of evidence, reinforcing Grace's resolve while cementing the case against the hidden puppeteers of this betrayal. Yet even as Grace found herself embroiled in espionage, reminiscent of the stories she had only imagined in novels, it was her indomitable spirit that became the unsung hero of this drama. There is no journey more transformative than one rooted in reclaiming one's identity, and therein lay the essence of empowerment. For those drawing parallels to their own lives, remember, it is the daring to step beyond the ordinary that sets the course for justice. As meticulously as a spider spins its web, Grace and Teresa's efforts culminated in an intricate trap for the unscrupulous architects. A fateful morning with a coordinated verve, only seasoned agents could muster, the FBI descended upon the ill-gotten heart of deception. The Davis family, including the once trusted Matthew, discovered the precipice of their carefully constructed plan, crumbling into an abyss marked by arrests, handcuffs, and the chilling clang of inevitable doors closing behind them. Witnessing the dismal unraveling of those who once paraded as loyalists struck a chord of raw victory intertwined with poignant loss. It is in these climactic crescendos of life that the essence of human resilience shines brightest. One cannot help but reflect on the raw tenacity it takes to steer personal devastation towards societal redemption. Despite this victory breaching the surface, Grace felt an unsettling mixture of triumph and sorrow, moral victory shadowing familial tragedy. To those invariably caught in the crosshairs of familial ties and ethical dilemmas, resilience is not the absence of vulnerability but the courage to confront it head-on. Grace's journey, underscored by legal process and emotional catharsis, portrays a road not solely paved with justice, but with the empowering promise of new beginnings discernible through the wreckage of deceit. Her story, laden with the complexities of justice and reconciliation, becomes a beacon, a narrative persuading each heart to echo its cry for truth and restitution against the smothering silence of betrayal. In life's turbulent seas, the path of betrayal often leaves behind a fraught trail of mixed emotions and convoluted judgments. As soon as Grace re-entered the halls that had once sung the sweet melodies of familial warmth, she became keenly aware that the place had been transformed into a web of concealed intentions and whispered plans. Her reality, once founded on love and trust, now felt like a cruel illusion. Yet even in her aching vulnerability and the weight of imminent danger, Grace transformed desperation into duty and vulnerability into a poignant stride towards truth. It was the undulating cadence of those hushed conversations, potential grenades of deceit wrapped in familial familiarity, that Grace had returned to capture. She donned the hidden microphone as an armor against the tide of betrayals she could physically feel in the house's very architecture. Her heart pounded to the beat of those concealed discussions, every heartbeat echoing the reality of danger she willingly embraced to unravel the conspiracy they had spun. The mantle of courage she bore was not out of sheer defiance but with an understanding, carve the truth from the shadows, and from it her life anew. With every word she recorded, Grace steeled her resolve against the threatening murmur of voices plotting her ruin. The plans to forge her signature for financial gain laid open the words burned into her heart as much as onto the recorded device. Navigating these clandestine familial theaters was perilous, yet fueled by the determination to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Grace forged ahead. In the gathering storm of betrayal, these recordings became both her protective shield and sword, enabling her to chart a course toward justice. Reflect on the nature of betrayal, and you'll find it is not merely the act of breaking trust, but the malignant shadow it casts over every interaction thereafter. Yet through this shadow activated Grace's strategic view, each conversation secretly recorded became a stepping stone toward triumph over the very web from which she was once entrapped. The tapes, those whispered echoes of greed and deception, were the catalyst for justice she now orchestrated with calculated precision. As you explore Grace's navigations, consider, would you stand in the fire to search for embers of truth to expose the villainous masquerade of those who parade as trusted kin? Grace's venture wasn't merely about revealing hidden forgeries, but charting a new course where integrity becomes your ally. Consider these scripts of triumph, where the perpetrator's words become the bastion of truth to break chains of suppression. Grace's journey boldly portrays the act of confronting deception not as a passive occurrence, but as an active crusade, a defiant proclamation that truth shall not be silenced. In traversing family fractures to seek broader justice, it's about redefining the narratives of courage, a rebellion against fabricated traps of deceit by wielding transparency as your weapon. Emerging from the gathering tempest of recorded revelations, Grace knew she had amassed the arsenal to confront the very essence of betrayal head-on. It's not just the action of recording evidence, but the symbolic reclaiming of agency, morphing vulnerability into an unbreakable resolve. This process demonstrates that while betrayal and manipulation may initially fray the edges of one's spirit, resilience can mend the fabric into one of firmer, unyielding strength. In this realm of devised manipulation and strategic rebirth, Grace's story becomes not just one of personal triumph, but a shared chronicle of the human condition, where each decision forms the foundation of a reclaimed identity. The recordings, those tangible artifacts of treachery, became the backbone of a pursuit for justice that not only sought retribution, but the reclamation of integrity. Through Grace's unfolding journey, the art of reclaiming one's narrative is portrayed not as an isolated endeavor, but a rallying cry for those who find themselves ensnared in the labyrinth of familial betrayal. The sequel to every downfall unfolds through the fortitude of those unwilling to surrender to their grief. Grace's path, marked by gathering evidence from the undercurrents of merciless deceit, illuminates the power inherent in transforming silence into testament, a story of redemption crafted from tenacity's ink. As Grace ventured further into the abyss of familial betrayal, her resolve fortified by each deceitful pledge captured on tape, she edged closer to the lighthouse of justice, in a sea forsaken by truth but aimed for righteousness. In the midst of the fallout, Grace finds herself standing alone in the quiet storm that has shattered the facade of family unity. Not quite desolate, but struggling to find the ground beneath her feet as the echoes of betrayal reverberate around her. Arrests have been made visible, ramifications of the web of deceit meticulously untangled through Grace's daring bravery and tactical acumen. Silence, once a refuge of withheld emotion and caution, now stands as a monument to unveiled truths. This silence is different. It resonates with finality, punctuated by the sounds of doors closing, not just prison doors, but those that kept loyalty, integrity, and love hidden away. Revisiting Grace means revisiting a heart that oscillates between relief and sorrow. She watches her son Matthew, his figure silhouetted against the cold sterility of justice, prevailing without warmth. It's this poignant moment filled with dichotomies and unarticulated grief that lays the bedrock for a deeper understanding of justice, not merely as punishment, but as a tool for liberation. It's about Grace standing at the crucible of a new beginning, bolstered by the remnants of what once seemed like a happy family. Inside the glass confines of the prison visiting room, Grace and Matthew sit separated by more than just transparent barriers. There, Matthew unravels threads of his narrative strands woven from desperation, seduction by promises of wealth, and manipulation by the Davis family, revealing how allure camouflaged malevolent intent. His confession speaks to a larger malaise, the relentless pursuit of prosperity without consideration of its cost. Every tearful contrition that escapes Matthew's lips is an indictment of lost values unraveling before a mother who grapples to reconcile the boy she raised with the man before her. In every whispered apology, Grace feels the harsh burn of betrayal, yet there's a resurgence within her, a stirring of compassion colored by the shades of lost warmth. It's the close interplay of love's history and hurt's presence that complicates the possibility of complete forgiveness. For Grace, navigating through the dense emotional terrain isn't merely an exercise of forgiving or forgetting, but understanding the shape and shadow of loyalty challenged. As the trial looms, curtains rise on the exposure of secrets once rendered indelible in silos of silent complicity. The courtroom is no less a stage for drama, where the Davis family's systemic treachery stands laid bare. The impact is undeniable, a cascading effect, where each revealed fraud traps them further in a net they cast themselves. Jessica, Robert, and Brenda each face the ramifications, not just legally, but through the rupture of false identities meticulously built over deceptive strategies. Matthew, despite his cooperation, is bound within the justice meted a smaller price but a heavy burden. Years of planning and exploitation dissolved amid the impartial stare of the law leave Grace with remnants to rebuild upon. There's cathartic justice in seeing the orchestrators of her suffering receive fitting sentences which reinstate not only balance but a sense of restored fairness. However, this reprieve isn't enough to stanch the emotional hemorrhage of trust and kinship that drips slowly, steadily, into the quiet solace of her solitary reflections. And yet, Grace rises a phoenix, amid ashes of familial ruin. She returns to her beloved house on Magnolia Street, the backdrop of her trials and triumphs, now symbolizing a space where memories blend with new beginnings. With the neighborhood she cherishes joining ranks beside her, Grace initiates the painstaking task of reclaiming and restoring. The community she once feared to lose now stands with her, embodying the anchor that steadies her through the turbulent surge of recovery. The story seems less a tale of simple vengeance now, and more of redemption, not just in individual terms, but as a collective communal exhalation of stability. Grace takes purposeful steps, firm in her resolve to not only heal herself, but to ensure no others suffer similar grievances in this tight-knit patchwork of shared humanity. Empowered by shared resilience, the foundation bearing William's name emerges not merely as homage, but as a beacon of hope for those ensnared in similar webs of deceit and betrayal. Through it, Grace secures his legacy, extending the strength and lessons of one personal story to a broader audience. What Grace achieves is more than redress. It is a renewal, a renaissance of self and surroundings, shaped by generosity of spirit and steadfast optimism. She becomes the living testament of what it means to not merely confront betrayal but to use it to strengthen and inform an inclusive recovery and restitution. Here she closes the chapter, but in doing so opens avenues for healing, growth, and an enduring inner peace. As Grace exited the sun-drenched visitation room, her heart heavy with the weight of unfinished emotions, the clang of the prison door echoed like a final note in the symphony of betrayal. The confrontation with Matthew had scarred her more deeply than she anticipated. As she gazed into his eyes, once a mirror of her own love, she searched desperately for a spark of her innocent boy, but found a haunted stranger wrapped in guilt and regret. Matthew's revelations were a bitter concoction of financial desperation and manipulation by those who should have been steadfast, the Davis family of wolves in domestic disguises. His apologies were sincere, yet transient, like autumn leaves grasping vainly at their branches. Standing there, Grace had battled a maelstrom of emotions. Could she ever forgive the boy she had cradled in her arms despite his transgressions? The question pierced her core, unresolved and relentless. Returning home was an empty yet cathartic journey, her spirit achingly aware of the widening chasm between love and trust. As she retraced her steps back to the house on Magnolia Street, the neighborhood appeared different, familiar, yet cloaked in a patina of sorrow and resilience. Each crack in the pavement resonated with her internal fractures, demanding reckoning. The house, once a beacon of familial unity, now harbored memories enshrouded in deceit. Within its walls, the ghosts of laughter mingled with whispers of betrayal. Grace busied herself with reclaiming its sanctity, determined to cleanse each corner of the shadows that had once loomed large. Her resolve was not merely personal but rippled through her community. Each stroke of paint, every nail driven into the wood sang a song of restitution and unity. She endeared herself to her neighbors, the patchwork of humanity that stitched hope into her unraveling narrative. With each day, Grace found herself leaning more on Teresa, her stalwart in this storm. Teresa's pragmatic wisdom and shared outrage forged a new pathway for Grace. Together they discovered how unfaltering resolve could transform pain into power. Their shared laughter over warm tea and reflective silences underscored the truth of solidarity. As the news of the trial shimmered over the horizon, Grace steeled herself for the next chapter. The courtroom would unravel the fabric of the Davis family's deceit, their tapestries of lies laid bare. On the stand stood not just Jessica, Robert, and Brenda, whose carefully curated veneers would be shattered by justice, but her beloved Matthew, delicate threads of ambiguity in his moral fabric. The trial was not a simple unfolding of justice, but a cathartic journey through the wreckage of familial bonds. Each testimony peeled back layers of artifice, exposing the raw nerves of ambition and greed. Despite the ink of her pain still wet, Grace glimpsed the possibility of restoration. As Matthew's cooperation afforded him a reduced sentence, her heart stirred a gentle tug away from despair towards hope. In these judicial halls, Grace's resolve was validated. Her isolation transformed into solidarity, each verdict a brick in the foundation of her renewed faith in justice. While the emotional toll lingered, a shadow that danced at the edge of her consciousness, a measure of relief washed over her. As the page turned, Grace walked back into the light of day, its warmth a balm against her weary soul. Her son's fate, entwined with remorse, would tread a separate path, a parallel line that may intersect once more given time's gentle prod. The house on Magnolia Street awaited her, standing proudly against the skies, its walls now glowing with renewed life. Each creak of the floorboards was a testament to her determination, every room a capsule of restored hope. Neighbors gathered their smiles, dimpling the everydayness of sidewalks with threads of gratitude and relief. It was their silence, their knowing nods that fortified Grace, turning her heartbreak into a reservoir of resilience. Under Teresa's guidance, Grace evolved from redemption seeker to community champion, her narrative, binding the neighborhood into a safety net of vigilant accountability. As they reimagined their homes, Grace's own metamorphosis mirrored the street's restoration, a harmony woven from the tender threads of shared trials. Each memory of William, her late husband, became an ethereal guide, a beacon tenderly illuminating her path forward, his love a compass steering her through the flux of recovery. In her heart, Grace knew her story was more than personal. It was an invitation for others to confront their own betrayals, an open page awaiting those ready to write new endings from old wounds. As she stood a guardian over her reborn home, she imagined a future untouched by treachery, but filled with kinship and courage. Grace was not merely rebuilding brick and mortar. She was reweaving a tapestry of life, where betrayal was but a shadow against a backdrop of unyielding light. The courtroom echoed with the murmur of whispered anticipation as the trial commenced. Every eye was fixed on the front where the Davis family sat, their composure a fragile veneer over cracking facades of guilt and fear. Jessica, Robert, and Brenda, once the orchestrators of a meticulous dance around legality, now found themselves shackled in their own web of deceit. The air thrummed with the gravity of their unraveling secrets, each revelation like a stone dropped into a pond rippling through the lives they had touched. Grace sat in the gallery, her heart a tumult of emotions. This was validation and vindication, yet tinged with the melancholy of betrayal's deep scars. As the prosecution methodically outlined the Davis family's elaborate scheme, each piece of evidence felt like reclaiming another inch of her stolen life. The judge's stern eyes mirrored the weight of the decisions he was about to make, underscoring the seriousness of justice about to be served. Testimonies flowed, underscoring the Davis family's manipulation. They had cloaked themselves in a veneer of respectability while presiding over a kingdom of fraudulence. Each statement from financial experts and the FBI laid bare a tapestry woven with greed and deception. Grace listened intently, her resolve coiled tightly within, recognizing the depths of cunning that had held her own son captive in its thrall. The moment arrived for Matthew to take the stand. His eyes, once filled with youthful certainty, now flickered between shame and a desperate plea for understanding. His voice cracked under the strain of confession, exposing raw nerves and the desperation that had driven him into the Davis family's machinations. His cooperation, however, was the pivotal act that unraveled their strategy, securing what little redemption the court might allow. As the verdicts were pronounced, the room buzzed with the finality of justice. Jessica, Robert, and Brenda were sentenced with a severity befitting their crimes, a quarantine for lies and forgeries that would stretch across decades. Matthew, in contrast, received a sentence tempered by his cooperation, though the stain on his soul was beyond any prisoner's redemption. For Grace, it was the bittersweet taste of justice tinged with a mother's unending love and sorrow. Even as relief washed over her, Grace knew the road ahead was long. Justice might have been served, but the emotional exile wrought by betrayal lingered like a ghost in the periphery of her thoughts. Her burden was not just the loss of trust, but the reassembling of a shattered perception of family and fidelity. Back among her neighbors, their embraces and whispered congratulations wrapped around her like a balm, softening the jagged edges of her hurt. In their eyes, she saw reflections of her own journey, a shared understanding that transcended her personal ordeal and tapped into something universal, the necessity of perseverance in the face of adversity. Yet Grace understood the necessity of balance, of mourning and forgiveness that one must extend to oneself. The neighborhood was more than a collection of adjacent homes. It was a collective organism of shared dreams and mutual dependencies. In their perceived unity, Grace found a buoy that would lift her above the ebb and flow of past despair. Moving forward, Grace intended to bear more than her own pain. Her story and its ripples in the courtroom was not an isolated narrative but an invocation for change. She envisioned using her ordeal as a foundation, a bedrock from which others could learn to protect themselves or emerge with dignity intact, regardless of the betrayals they might face. She would channel her energies into productive pursuits, constructing a new framework for assistance, a beacon of hope for victims of financial misdeeds. And through this newfound purpose, she would begin to reclaim what the Davis family had tried to strip from her: not just material security, but the right to decide her own narrative and to use her voice in transforming betrayal into a tool of empowerment for others. In the legal confines of the courtroom, structures had crumbled and a new order was established on the ruins of deceit. Beyond its walls, Grace envisioned new beginnings fueled by the strength derived from adversity. Her journey, once marked by loneliness and intense personal disclosure, was now cemented into the collective narrative of resilience and renewal. Grace stepped through the door of her once vibrant home on Magnolia Street, feeling the ghosts of laughter and familial bonds that seemed to echo through the empty hallways. Each creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet felt like a haunting reminder of the joyous past she had shared here, a past now marred by betrayal and deceit. The house, with its weathered paint and overgrown garden, had been a sanctuary of memories, a vessel of shared history and love. Now it was a testament to the price she had paid to reclaim not just bricks and mortar, but her dignity and peace of mind. With the support of her steadfast friend, Teresa, Grace set about rebuilding not just her dwelling but the shattered remnants of her life. Through this arduous process, she danced between despair and determination, drawing strength from the knowledge that the battle for her home was won, albeit at a significant emotional cost. She envisioned each repaired beam, each newly painted wall as a symbol of defiance against the darkness that had attempted to consume her life. The act of restoration became a cathartic ritual, each stroke of the paintbrush a healing balm to her wounded spirit. Grace could feel the solidarity of her Magnolia Street neighbors enveloping her like a comforting embrace. The community, once a simple geographic connection, had evolved into a powerful network of allies. Their support became the scaffolding upon which she rebuilt her existence piece by painstaking piece. Neighbors who had initially watched the drama unfold with detached interest now rallied around her, offering help and kindness, planting flowers in her garden, sharing in cups of late-night tea, and above all reminding her that she was not alone. Each interaction served as a reminder of the resilience that lay beneath the facade of her everyday demeanor. She found solace in the knowledge that her struggle had unveiled the insidious plot orchestrated by the Davis family. The neighborhood now understood the magnitude of the danger that had lurked on its doorstep, and Grace's triumph became a communal victory. Her story galvanized them to remain vigilant, to cherish and protect their homes with more tenacity than before. But beneath the surface of renewed hope, Grace grappled with the emotional aftermath. As she unpacked the boxes of her life, she came upon old photographs and mementos that whispered of better times. They served as a double-edged sword, bringing both pangs of nostalgia and a reminder of betrayals too raw to ignore. Despite these moments of sorrow, she acknowledged that facing the past was a necessary step toward crafting a future unmarred by bitterness. With Teresa's guidance, Grace began weaving herself into the fabric of community initiatives, seeking healing in the act of helping others like her who had been preyed upon by those they trusted most. In this endeavor, she began to lay the foundation for the William Villa-Lobos Foundation, a beacon of hope for others ensnared in financial deceit. Through this mission, Grace channeled her pain into powerful action, ensuring that her hardship would light the way for others, navigating the dark waters of betrayal. As the days turned into weeks, Grace's home breathed new life. The scaffolding came down, revealing the polished heartwood floors and sun-drenched walls. In this restored haven, Grace found not only comfort but also a renewed sense of purpose. The home, now a sanctuary once more, was a testament to her resilience, standing proud and strong as a symbol of her journey from victim to victor. Yet with every step forward, the shadow of what had transpired lingered, gnawing at the edge of her resolve. Memories of her confrontation with Matthew persisted like an unsolved riddle. The mixed emotions, love for her son and disappointment in his betrayal, were threads she continued to untangle. She knew forgiveness was a personal quest, a journey she would travel at her own pace. And in the quiet moments, she allowed herself to hope that one day reconciliation might be possible. But for now, Grace focused on the here and now, honoring William's legacy through her actions, feeling his enduring presence in her heart. With every person she helped, every life she touched, through the foundation she forged a new path, turning her grief into a guiding star. It was this new beginning, grounded in love and fortified by her trials, that would sustain her as she ventured boldly into the future. Grace was no longer just reclaiming her home, she was reclaiming her story. As the March sunlight danced between leaves, casting playful shadows on the street below, Grace felt a gentle warmth spread through her heart. The once cryptic whispers and sympathetic nods of her neighbors had transformed into hearty waves and sincere smiles. The Magnolia neighborhood, which had silently watched the turmoil unfold, now exuberantly expressed its loyalty and gratitude. Her neighbors, once bystanders, had become her steadfast allies, showering her with support and admiration for unveiling the deceit of the Davis family. This overwhelming community embrace renewed Grace's faith in humanity, affirming that her struggle had not been in vain. In these interactions, she discovered not just a solace shared collectively, but a buoying inspiration that sparked a transformative idea to take active strides in community advocacy. Grace, still reeling from the betrayal within her own family, realized that vulnerability, when held in the compassionate arms of a community, could be alchemized into strength and purpose. Thus, she embarked on a journey of healing, not just personally, but for the wider neighborhood, ensuring no one else would experience the dark shadow of exploitation that had once loomed over her. Grace ventured into various community meetings, sharing her story and listening to others, unraveling the tapestry of unspoken fears and hidden pains that many had kept bottled inside. Her presence brought a newfound spirit of vigilance and mutual support, inspiring others to speak out against injustices that they too might be quietly enduring. This collective alliance against manipulation and greed fortified her resolve, reinstating her as a central figure of guidance and empowerment within the neighborhood. Her efforts began modestly, yet carried an intensity burning with the urgency of unhealed wounds and unanswered questions. She spearheaded initiatives for community education on legal and financial literacy, ensuring the Magnolia residents were equipped with knowledge to defend themselves against potential exploitation. Through workshops and neighborhood watch programs, she helped galvanize a culture of prevention rather than reaction, relying on her bitter lessons to inform and educate. Grace became a bastion of awareness, relentlessly campaigning for stronger protective measures and community unity, which resonated deeply with those who had once watched her journey from a distance. The world outside her immediate circle rapidly embraced her initiatives, recognizing the power of her story and the profound change it heralded. Local businesses and municipal leaders extended their resources, fostering a network of support that allowed Grace to broaden her impact. What had once been a small ripple within Magnolia stretched out to become a wave of reform, touching lives beyond the borders of her neighborhood, embodying the hope that such betrayals could be confronted with justice and support. Within this space, Grace found herself not only a messenger of change, but a pioneer of community solidarity. Her involvement resurrected a sense of belonging that had been crushed under the weight of personal betrayal. With each interaction, each story shared, and each initiative launched, she felt the missing pieces of her shattered life gently reassemble, reminiscent of a once scattered puzzle now coming together in a picture of hope and resilience. As she engaged more deeply with her neighbors, Grace began to understand the true essence of a community interwoven lives, creating a safety net that neither judgment nor isolation could penetrate. Ironically, the very elements that had once threatened to pull her apart now held her firmly together, anchoring her to a future brimming with possibilities. She was writing a new chapter not just for herself, but for every silent sufferer within her reach. In embracing this larger role, Grace uncapped a reservoir of personal healing, finding that her own journey towards closure lied intertwined with the welfare of her community. Each step taken alongside her neighbors was a step towards mending her trust, proving that open wounds could foster blooming camaraderies just as shadows can spawn new light. Her story, once steeped in betrayal, was turning into a legacy of empowerment, inhabiting a place between sorrow and triumph, despair and hope. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the Magnolia neighborhood thrived under the protective canopy of newly fortified trust and transparency. Grace, now guided by collective strength and individual resilience, found her resolve unshakable, grounded in a newfound purpose. The scars of past betrayals no longer defined her. Instead, they became the terrain upon which she built bridges of community reform. This journey from devastation to advocacy had changed Grace irrevocably. She knew the path forward was one she need not walk alone. Instead, she was accompanied by an invigorated community, each member uplifted by their shared commitment to justice and mutual support. With every meeting attended and every hand held, the shadow receded further, making room for a hope that now at last felt unassailable. The establishment of the William Villalobos Foundation was not just a response to personal betrayal but a clarion call for justice and prevention. As Grace and Teresa charted the course of this foundation, they cemented a commitment to changing the narrative for others. This commitment was fueled by a deep-seated understanding of the devastation wrought by deceit and the isolation it breeds. The foundation's conception was rooted in Grace's own labyrinthine journey through betrayal and recovery. It was a direct, tangible action that spoke not just to her resilience, but also to her unwavering belief in community and support. Fueled by a desire to shield others from similar fates, Grace envisioned a support fund that would offer victims not just financial assistance, but a network of community solidarity. This was more than a safety net. It was a beacon of hope for those lost in the woods of their own deceptive encounters. In the weeks that followed, Grace and Teresa meticulously planned the foundation's outreach and resources. They met with legal advisors, financial experts, and community leaders to ensure they covered all avenues of support. The foundation needed to be more than just a reactionary measure. It had to be a proactive force against fraud, arming individuals with the knowledge and tools to recognize and resist deceit. Teresa's involvement was pivotal. Her expertise and unwavering support were the linchpin that held the foundation together in its nascent stages. Having journeyed alongside Grace through the highest tides of turmoil, Teresa brought a balanced perspective to the foundation's mission, emphasizing the blend of empathy and legality necessary to foster enduring change. The foundation quickly became a haven for those suffering from financial betrayal. Grace's story, though singular in its specifics, resonated with many. The community responded with overwhelming positivity. Volunteers flocked to the cause, eager to contribute to a mission born from shared experiences. This collective effort was transformative, morphing personal pain into a shared succor that reached wider circles than Grace had ever anticipated. Perhaps the most profound element of this venture was its ripple effect. What started as a personal initiative to combat financial fraud became a community-driven force reflective of a powerful collective healing process. Grace's journey had unknowingly expanded beyond her solo struggle, touching the lives of countless others, spiraling outward in a cascade of empowered action and support. As the foundation began its operations, it provided more than just monetary relief. It became a cornerstone of education and advocacy. Workshops were coordinated to teach the community about financial literacy and fraud prevention, empowering individuals with the substantial knowledge needed to safeguard their futures. The Foundation's work dovetailed with local schools and businesses, creating pervasive awareness across the Magnolia neighborhood. Grace took immense satisfaction in witnessing the seeds of change sprouting across her community. The apprehension and trepidation that once bound her had unraveled, giving way to a profound sense of duty and purpose. She was no longer just a victim or survivor. Grace was a formidable advocate for justice, a symbol of resilience, ready to challenge injustice wherever it reared its deceitful head. The narrative, originally marred by betrayal, was rewritten to reflect one of collaboration and perseverance. Former strangers became allies, their support for the Foundation, a testament to the inherent goodness of people when united by a common cause. Each successful intervention, each life slightly made easier, filled Grace with a replenished energy, a restorative balm on the wounds that deceit had inflicted. In this renewed purpose and foundation, Grace found a meaningful way to honor her late husband, William. It was in his memory that she drew strength, channeling his wisdom and perseverance through the foundation that bore his name. Through this, she ensured that his legacy endured, guiding others through the murky waters of financial deceit as he had once guided her through life's trials. The William Villalobos Foundation was emblematic of a larger truth, that even from the deepest wounds, profound change can emerge. Grace's story, her life's second act, unfurled not just as personal redemption but as a shared triumph over adversity. Her journey illuminated a path for others, shining a light on the resilience inherent within the human spirit, proving that from the ashes of betrayal, a phoenix of hope and empowerment could invariably rise. As Grace embraced the opportunity for a fresh start, the world around her appeared anew, much like a once tarnished mirror, finally polished to reveal clarity and a broader reflection. The Magnolia neighborhood, once a backdrop to her trials, now buzzed with the vibrant pulse of rejuvenated community life, where shared smiles and waves spoke louder than mistrust, and whispers Grace found solace. The wounds of betrayal hadn't merely healed, they had transformed into pathways for fresh connections to bloom the soil enriched by resilience and renewed purpose. Immersing herself in local activities, Grace became a familiar presence in town hall meetings, neighborhood watch gatherings, and community cleanup projects. Her involvement was more than a balm for her soul, it served as a beacon for others. As someone who transformed her tribulations into triumphs, her journey resonated within these shared communal spaces where neighbors bonded over visions of a safer, more vibrant Magnolia. The friendships she forged in these communal circles were profound, demonstrating the power of collective human empathy and the healing it could offer. People she once knew only as passing faces on the street, or perhaps faint acquaintances, became pivotal in her healing narrative. They were as varied and colorful as a patchwork quilt. Each relationship stitched together by shared experiences and aspirations. The Saturday potlucks, spontaneous excursions to local parks, and the tradition of Tuesday morning coffee at Linda's Diner became the warm stitches that closed the fabric of her heart. This newfound camaraderie not only nourished her spirit but ignited a spark she thought had long faded. Grace slowly rediscovered the joy of living, framed not by the confines of her personal tragedies but by the liberating expanse of human connection and compassion. Her laughter, once hindered by the shadows of betrayal, now rang with authenticity, resonating like a bold declaration of self-rediscovery across the streets of Magnolia. Grace's laughter wasn't just a sound, it was an emblem signaling the triumph of hope over despair. She pursued her pastimes with newfound fervor as music spilled into her life through the gentle strums of guitar lessons or the intimate rhythm of dancing at neighborhood gatherings. Gardening, another of her cherished hobbies, evolved from merely cultivating flowers into nurturing connections. Her once solitary garden now blossomed with the company of neighbors who found joy in planting beside her, sharing stories as they molded the earth with their hands, each seed a promise of kinship and trust. Through this shared labor, Grace marveled at the transformative power of collective action. It wasn't just about beautifying a corner of Magnolia. It was an act of reclaiming their narrative, ensuring that the scars of Deceit became overshadowed by what they collectively nurtured, a community as robust as the roots of the magnolia trees lining the streets. As Grace gathered stories from her new friends, each tale offered a piece of her own identity back to her, complete with the wisdom of their shared learning. These interactions weren't merely social, they were revealing. They laid bare universal truths about forgiveness, strength, and the inherent goodness that resides within people when motivated by a common spirit. For Grace, the echoes of betrayal that had once shadowed every thought and action had diminished. In their place, she found the echo of laughter and joy, the soundtrack of a life being redefined on her terms. The Magnolia neighborhood's revitalization was more than just physical. It was emblematic of Grace's internal transformation, a journey nourished by respect, support, and shared dreams. In these dynamic exchanges, Grace found a muse fueling her resolve to engage more deeply in community-driven initiatives. She evolved into a role model, her journey a mirror, reflecting the possibility that anyone could follow the path from darkness into light. Her openness to others' perspectives and her firm yet gentle guidance became a catalyst for personal and communal growth. The connections Grace forged in those moments laid the foundation for her advocacy, an endeavor buoyed by a unity she once doubted. This network strengthened her resolve, inspiring others to cultivate their visions and aspirations in the fertile grounds of Magnolia. In sharing her story, Grace encouraged others to pen their own, guided not by the specter of past misfortunes, but by the shared pursuit of healing and purpose. In the heart of Magnolia, Grace reaffirmed an essential truth. Life's narrative might be fraught with unforeseeable upheavals, but daring to engage with others in meaningful ways transforms each challenge into an opportunity for rebirth, a chance to paint one's future on a canvas as vibrant and hopeful as the neighborhood itself. Together they ensured that the lasting echoes of their collective voices drowned out the whispers of betrayal. In the wake of betrayal's tumultuous storm, Grace emerged with a resilience forged through adversity. Her journey through the labyrinth of familial treachery and heartache had culminated not just in personal survival, but in a legacy of empowerment and communal rebirth. This was her decision, a defiant stand against being defined by the actions of others. In dedicating her foundation to William's memory, she chose to honor the past while embracing a future that promised healing and renewal, a future sculpted by the hands of those who dared to dream alongside her. Grace's foundation was more than just a tribute. It was a living testament to love's tenacity and the indomitable spirit of rebuilding after devastation. Each initiative she undertook carried William's essence, his passion for justice, and his unwavering belief in the goodness of people. While the shadows of Matthew's betrayal still lingered, casting long, tentative threads into her emotional tapestry, the foundation was a beacon guiding her towards a larger purpose. It was through this that she found solace and a semblance of closure, transforming her pain into a force of social good. This endeavor, of course, was not without its challenges. Navigating the legal intricacies of establishing a foundation dedicated to supporting victims of financial fraud was a daunting task. Yet for Grace, the hurdles were merely stone steps in her ascent toward community advocacy. She partnered with experts, sought the guidance of seasoned philanthropists, and enlisted the help of friends who shared her vision. Teresa, as always, stood by her, the indefatigable ally whose wisdom and experience were indispensable in these initial steps. Together, they crafted a blueprint for the foundation that meticulously aligned with their mission, ensuring it was as resilient and adaptive as the Magnolia community itself. Each meeting, every plan and conversation was imbued with a personal commitment to justice. Grace found empowerment in crafting solutions and providing the resources she herself had once desperately sought. Her foundation provided avenues for legal aid, bolstered by a network of pro bono lawyers eager to extend their services to victims of deceit and manipulation. Workshops and seminars were organized, each event a chapter in the unfolding narrative of hope and recovery. Here in these acts of giving, Grace discovered that the most potent form of reclamation was to grant others the power and opportunity to reclaim their own narratives. For many, Grace's foundation was a lifeline, a support system in times of dire need. Through its activities, she not only supported others but also cultivated a fresh sense of community across Magnolia. Residents gathered in renovated halls and revived public spaces, engaging in dialogues that laid bare the vulnerabilities and strengths that bound them. Grace's tireless efforts kindled a spirit of unity, one that transcended individual stories of loss and betrayal to weave a broader tapestry of collective resilience. In these communal encounters, Grace witnessed the profound transformation that occurs when seeds of empathy and understanding are sown. Her journey was resonant with those who had faced similar tribulations. Each success story sprouting from the Foundation's work was a testament to the nurturing roots of a new beginning tended by Grace's unwavering dedication. It was here that she found the most profound homage to William, not just in the name of the Foundation, but in the very essence of its mission to foster justice and recovery for all. As time passed, reflecting on this newfound purpose offered Grace a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly honor her husband's legacy. William had been a man who stood for truth, who believed in the power of justice to rectify even the most grievous of wrongs. Through Grace's work, his values continued to ripple outwards, touching countless lives, guiding them toward healing and empowerment. Grace had transformed what could have been an enduring narrative of personal tragedy into one of redemption and renewal. This journey taught Grace more profoundly than any other experience that healing and justice were not finite goals, but ongoing processes. They were the cumulative result of countless small, courageous acts, both individual and mutual. In her quiet moments of reflection, Grace realized that while she had embarked on this path in search of justice for herself, she had discovered something even more valuable, a sense of purpose that transcended her personal story. It was the shared vision of a community, empowered a village of resilience, formed in the wake of hardship, that had become her sanctuary. In these collective triumphs, Grace found the peace she had long sought, a realization that the narratives of betrayal and loss could indeed metamorphose into stories of strength and collective integrity. This transformation, ever anchored by William's enduring spirit, forged in Magnolia not just a foundation for justice, but a new dawn of possibility for all willing to embrace it. Grace's journey of healing took a significant step forward as she realized that true restoration often blooms not from solitude but through the act of helping others. The William Villalobos Foundation was born out of this philosophy, fostering a beacon of hope for those ensnared by the cunning traps of financial deceit. Grace embodied resilience not as a mere character trait but as a living doctrine, redefining herself as she extended her hand to others in distress. The warmth of her empathy resonated, striking a chord with individuals who once found themselves voiceless and trapped in similar quagmires. This was no ordinary tale of charity, it was a masterclass in emotional and psychological revival. Grace's approach was holistic, understanding that those defrauded were often left in the shadows, burdened with shame and disbelief. Her foundation offered more than just financial aid. It was a sanctuary of empowerment, providing legal guidance, emotional support, and the solidarity of a community united in a shared ordeal. It was in these interactions where stories were exchanged and healing began that Grace found her purpose reaffirmed. In each outreach encounter, the wounds of her personal betrayal seemed to stitch themselves closed a little more. It was through the reflection of others' healing that her own heart found peace. Smiles rekindled by newfound hope mirrored the glow Grace saw in William's eyes during their many shared victories. She was becoming a beacon unknowingly, inheriting the mantle of justice and compassion he had so firmly upheld. Imagine standing in the shoes of someone entangled in financial treachery. The sense of betrayal, the isolation, so profound it almost seems insurmountable. Yet here was Grace not merely surviving her hardships but thriving through them, transforming heartache into a rallying cry. Her foundation became a testament to the fact that past wounds do not define one's future. Instead, they can fuel it with purpose and conviction. Through this lens, Grace's journey was far more than a solitary struggle. It was a communal odyssey that redefined boundaries and broke shackles. Her story offered solace to many, evidence that through collective resilience, the darkest of chapters could metamorphose into tales of triumph and empowerment. She stood as living proof that transformation is often forged in the fires of adversity, emerging not of bitterness but of a resolute dedication to justice and healing. Grace's involvement with the community opened new avenues both for personal growth and for collective nurturing. By engaging with others who mirrored her past vulnerability, she crafted a narrative of resilience and renewal. It was a dialogue of shared kinship that reinstated her faith in human connection, a stark contrast to the betrayal she had once endured. By choosing to channel her pain into action, Grace not only carved out a legacy for William, but also for herself, a legacy predicated on empathy, strength, and a resolute belief in justice. This was not a journey marked by hollow victories, but by substantial, meaningful connections that blossomed into lifelong affiliations. Each step forward brought with it a tide of inspiration, revealing that genuine healing stems from reaching back to lift others forward. In this, Grace discovered an unanticipated peace. It wasn't the type that simply comes from external justice served, but one cultivated from within through the countless flickers of light she ignited in others. This path to healing was reciprocal, where every life she touched invariably touched her back, forming a tapestry of encouragement and hope. In essence, Grace's life had become a symphony of second chances and new beginnings. Her story was no longer confined to personal triumph over adversity. It transcended into a motivational legacy of communal resilience and justice, a legacy that stretched far beyond the temporal boundaries of her own hardships. As the foundation thrived, each success story not only redefined its beneficiaries but also enriched Grace's journey. The transformative power of community support emerged as a recurring theme, emphasizing the profound impact one person could wield through the combined strength of many. Herein lay the ultimate narrative twist: revenge need not be destructive but constructive, creating ripples of healing that expand outward, inviting all to partake in its restorative embrace. Grace had unwittingly transformed what was once her greatest heartache into her greatest triumph, consistently affirming that the road to recovery isn't a solitary endeavor. It is one built with shared hope and collective ambition, underscoring that true healing flourishes through action and generosity, a testament that finds its deepest resolve in the hearts and lives uplifted along that journey. As Grace sat on her front porch, the sun setting over the horizon bathed Magnolia Street in a warm golden hue. The neighborhood was alive with the comforting sounds of children playing, neighbors greeting each other with nods and smiles, and the gentle rustle of leaves swaying in the evening breeze. This sense of community, once overshadowed by mistrust and deceit, now flourished in the aftermath of her perseverance and courage. It was a testament to Grace's unwavering spirit and her ability to transform betrayal into a beacon of hope for herself and those around her. Her thoughts inevitably drifted to William, whose unwavering love and wisdom had been her guiding light. In her quiet reflections, she found solace in the belief that his presence was continuously with her, gently guiding her steps as she rebuilt what was nearly lost. Each flower planted in the garden, every coat of paint applied to the walls of her home, and each meeting held at the William Villa-Lobos Foundation was imbued with his memory. His legacy, one of resilience and compassion, breathed new life into the once hollow spaces of her heart. Grace's journey from devastation to triumph was not an easy one. It required confronting the painful betrayal of those she loved most, enduring a battle in the courtroom where the euchre of truths and lies laid her life bare. She learned to navigate the murky waters of legal wrangling, to find strength in the support of Teresa and her community, and to face Matthew's betrayal with a resolve that stunned even herself. Through each challenge, she unearthed a strength and tenacity that had lain dormant, revealing dimensions of her character she hadn't known existed. In grappling with questions of forgiveness and justice, Grace chose the path less traveled, one of constructive revenge. She rejected the destructive cycle of hate and instead embraced a mission of healing and empowerment. The foundation she established not only provided legal and emotional support to victims of fraud, but also fostered a culture of vigilance and solidarity within the community. This was Grace's true revenge, turning her suffering into a source of strength for others, ensuring that the wounds inflicted upon her would lead to a scar that symbolized growth and fortitude. Every person she helped reflected a part of her own story, and in lifting them up, she elevated herself. The collective resilience of those she assisted rekindled her faith in humanity and the inherent goodness that sometimes lay buried beneath the surface. Each act of kindness, each success story wove itself into the tapestry of her legacy, one where justice and empathy converged to illuminate the darkest corners of human experience. In quiet moments, her reflections often turned introspective. She mused over the lessons life had imparted: the importance of trusting one's instincts, the power of community, and the indomitable spirit that resides within. She acknowledged the pain and the loss, but also recognized the gifts they bestowed: empathy, perspective, and a renewed sense of purpose. As Grace looked forward, hope anchored her heart. The new Magnolia Street was not just her dwelling, but a symbol of transformation and renewal. She aspired to nurture the seeds of change she had planted, to continue advocating for those silenced by injustice, and to savor the unexpected joys of second chances. The harmonious notes of life's symphony, forged through trials and triumphs, resonated with clarity and warmth. With each sunrise that graced her home, Grace envisioned a future marked by peace and fulfillment, one where William's unyielding spirit flowed through the branches of the trees they had planted together, watching over the neighborhood they had cherished. The journey had been long and arduous, but its rewards were profound: an enriched life redefined by love, community, and the enduring hope that with every new dawn, the possibility for renewal awaited. In sharing her story, Grace hoped to inspire others to reflect on their own journeys. She urged them to confront their pain, to find strength in unexpected places, and to embrace the transformative power of healing through action. Her story was a testament to the potential within each individual to rise above betrayal and loss, and to become a catalyst for positive change. It was an invitation for others to find their own path to redemption, and in doing so to discover the boundless grace that thrives in all who dare to believe in the possibility of a better tomorrow. In the quiet aftermath of turmoil, Grace stands at the precipice of transformation. The echoes of past betrayal now ripple through her consciousness, not as haunting reminders, but as catalysts for profound change. The Magnolia Street home, once the scene of abrupt treachery, has become the canvas for her rebirth. Each falling leaf from the trees whispers tales of redemption. Each floorboard creaks with the weight of history transformed into wisdom. The journey from vengeance to awareness has not been linear, yet every step has cemented her place in a new narrative, one of unflinching resilience and quiet strength. As the Davis family's schemes unravel, their world crumbles under the weight of their own deceit. Imagery of falling objects, crystal vases, shattering plans once meticulously crafted, now reduced to dust, capture their decline. Jessica stands alone amidst the ruins, her echoes of promises and justifications lost in the silence. For them there will be no triumphant return, no vindication. Only the echoes of what could have been if greed had not blinded their judgments. Grace has emerged not as a victor in the trivial sense, for true victory lays not in the defeat of others, but in the quiet revolution within oneself. She sits amidst the tranquility of her reclaimed home, no longer seeking validation through loud proclamations. Silence that once haunted her with solitude has transformed into a sanctuary, a kingdom she now rules with grace and poise. Her power does not lie in the volume of her voice, but in the depth of her resolve. And you, as you ponder this tale unfold, what would you take from Grace's silent ascent? Can you see the power that lies not in the clatter of revenge, but in the quiet spaces left in its wake? Could you, like Grace, have waited beneath the weight of injustice long enough to let the truth claw its way to the surface on its own terms? In this unfolding narrative of life, some endings come not with fanfare, but with a gentle rustle that stirs the heart. Doors no longer barricaded by resentment but unlocked by forgiveness stand ajar, welcoming the uncertain future. Rings heavy with the symbolism of betrayal lay quietly abandoned on the floor, telling stories of contracts broken and trust misplaced. Yet these objects are now just that, objects devoid of meaning, as the true transformation occurs within the heart and mind of those who rise above. Emptiness carries its own kind of sacredness, a silent testament to the space now available for newfound freedom and self-discovery. Grace breathes deeply within the walls of a room, cleansed by time and reflection, where the once overwhelming void has gracefully evolved into a vessel for hope and renewal. Some lessons no longer need to be articulated. They are carved into the very fabric of one's being, whispered in the dance of light across a newly cherished space. Grace emerges not just as a survivor but as a beacon of possibility, a reminder that grace is not merely a name but a state of being achieved through hardship and reconciliation. As this chapter closes, the true end lies not in words spoken or actions taken, but in the quiet understanding of life's capacity for change. In silence therein lies an infinite possibility, rendering each breath a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Perhaps in witnessing such journeys, one realizes that some stories do not conclude. They simply linger in sacred quietude, inviting contemplation and offering a serene nod to the beauty of life rediscovered. Would you then stand amidst the ruins and find grace where others might find only despair? Could you embrace the silence and let it become the canvas upon which a new life takes shape? For in the end, some transformations walk softly, and sporting, elegant dance in the shadows, yielding strength born not from the clamor of conflict, but from the embrace of profound peace.